We are talking about the fact that the Secret Service had requested emergency funding just a few weeks ago. And, Will, I wanted to break down not only what they did, but we were talking in the break about why it hasn't gone through yet, why it hasn't happened, as there is a government shutdown looming.
That's right. So they asked what they call an anomaly request to congressional committees back in August. And this was before this latest attempt on President Trump's life, but in light of the first attempt in Pennsylvania. And so what they were asking was that this supplementary funding be placed into the continuing resolution, which Congress is debating right now, because we are approaching a funding deadline of October 1st to keep the government open. So they were asking for this monetary package and funding package to go into this continuing resolution that Congress will be voting on. To me, I understand them at the time saying that Secret Service would have insufficient resources to sustain and enhance protective operations, but asking for that money in a continuing resolution doesn't get passed until October 1st. Then you're a month away from the election. What I feel like should have been requested is that they go to Congress and ask for a standalone funding bill of Secret Service, of a supplementary package, similar to when you see like all the emergency packages of funding that they've done for Ukraine.
Yeah. Why does that have to be stuffed in something else?
Exactly. If you need it now, why are you saying just put it in your funding bill, which there's going to be a ton of fight over? The government could shut down, then you get none of that funding. Instead, ask for a supplementary funding bill that's a standalone bill saying, in light of the presidential election and the threat climate that we see, the Secret Service needs Congress to pass a bill that would help us in some way beef up security around the leading candidate for president, President Trump. I understand that they're going to try to say, look, we had a situation where we were protecting the sitting U.S. president, and he was also one of the candidates. And then we have the former U.S. president, which is a candidate. So that's a strain on resources. But then you have a switcheroo. And now we have a new candidate for president, the vice president.
They were already protecting her. So, I feel like that's an excuse here. We've been protecting former presidents for a long time now. And it obviously is a different threat level when you're talking about a former president actively running for president.
Right.
Plus, you had Secret Service at some point, for a very brief period, Secret Service that was going to RFK post-assassination attempt. That was withdrawn once he stepped down and ended his campaign. But now you have this situation where President Trump has had multiple assassination attempts. He still has a couple months of, how many days out are we from the election? 55-ish? Probably from the election. I'm going to say round number, somewhere around there. So like you said, a long time to do it. They've requested more funding, but in typical Washington fashion, they have to tie it up in some other, situation. They have to make it pork in one of these bills.
Right, and we are 48 days. I had to look it up real quick, but 48 days from the election. But here's also the other thing, is you look at, that the government loves to spend money.
Of course.
They're asking for more money, even if it passed today. How does just more dollars really at this point, because if they don't have enough agents, they don't have enough resources,
then train people.
Exactly. Yeah. Then you're looking at a lag time of being able to beef up security. I feel like this should have been done months ago, if not even sooner, in looking ahead at this. At the same time, you have the criticism that the FBI and other agencies, once again, probably should have had this person on their radar, as they like to say many times after a mass shooting, a mass casualty event that they knew.
You can't imagine that he wasn't.
Well, right, because the Wall Street Journal put out this morning that U.S. authorities were warned about suspected Trump gunmen, not specifically that he was going to try to assassinate President Trump, but of all the activities that he was doing in Ukraine, looking at human smuggling across borders, trying to buy passports. This is someone with his 100+ encounters with law enforcement, him being convicted of having a weapon of mass destruction when he barricaded himself in his former workplace with a machine gun, fully automatic machine gun, back 20 years ago.
100 is a lot.
100 encounters with law enforcement, and yet this man is still able to freely travel to Ukraine, move about the country, live in Hawaii, get all the way to Florida. with somehow obtain a weapon. That's part of the charges, that it has a serial number scratched off.
You can't drive from Hawaii to Florida.
In general.
In general. It's just not possible. We don't have that technology. So it wasn't like he was somewhere on the West Coast and had these weapons and traveled. Somehow he was able to leave his home state, acquire a weapon, or worst case scenario, probably get through the airport with that get this weapon without being caught and make his way down to Florida, literally crossing the entire country. We don't know how long he was in the state of Florida. That hasn't been, I believe, revealed yet.
And I assume that we will, as these days go on, get more press briefings as more information comes to light. You and I were watching that press briefing yesterday afternoon, though, and we're kind of let down by the forthcomingness of the investigators, whether it be the U.S. attorney, the sheriff of the county, and the FBI field agent that were there, because nothing they said was new information that hadn't already been reported for 3 or 4 hours prior to them going up to the podium. At that point, you know they have to have more information, but the reporters already had been told it by someone within these agencies. It raises once more, how tight-knit is this community? How well are they able to conduct an investigation when all the information they're bringing to a press briefing, someone else within some agency has already told the press hours before?
Yeah, it wasn't a whole lot of information, and they were getting very snarky with them.
Right.
If they were asking questions, they thought, yelling and screaming. It's like you just never dealt with press like this. Let's go to phones. Let's go to Eric, who's calling in North Carolina on line 3. Eric, you're on the air.
Hey, I had a quick question about the Secret Service and this, heat detection kind of technology in 2024. Why they don't seem to have it, or they're not using it, or to the degree that they should have it.
Yeah, Eric, I think that they do have access to a lot of this technology. One of the reasons we know this is because the way they were able to track that 12 hours was to ping his cell phone to see where his cell phone was for that day, and it had been in the area of Trump International. So they do have some access to that. When it comes to apprehending him, I do think there is obviously a hope and a want to de-escalate, to actually bring him in alive, which we did. It will be fascinating to actually find out if they can get more information of what brings someone to this point. What do they do? Because this is not usual. Usually, even in the situation of Lee Harvey Oswald, you didn't get to the point. He obviously survived initially, but did not get to the point of really being able to answer a lot of the questions we all have.
That's right. And as we saw yesterday, or saw reports of yesterday, he was laughing in court. They said he was smiling. He seemed coherent answering the judge's questions, so they didn't believe that there was a situation where he wasn't of sound mind for court purposes. Yeah. Clearly, if you are an attempted assassin, you are not of sound mind for humanity's purposes. Yeah. But he was laughing and joking with his court-appointed attorney. But on top of that, he stopped cooperating when they took him in, as his constitutional rights to do, requested the lawyer, and was not answering questions with the authorities at that time. So we will see as the investigation goes on what happens, how they are able to get information out of him, with him being an alive perpetrator, which many times is not the case in these type of scenarios.